Hey guys, 170 out here. I'm back with an interview, and today I am very pleased to say that I am joined by the quintessential gamer, Lawrence Sonntag. Lawrence, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, no problem. I'm glad to be here.
You've had a busy day, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, today's been an interesting one. I had an exterminator come by, spray down the place that I'm at, seal up a lot of holes, so I guess mice don't get in the I don't know. It's fascinating how in any given day, you would think, oh gosh, I'm getting into it already. Man, you would think, like, once you eliminate certain distractions from your life, like, I don't know, a job, you would think that suddenly you would just have an explosion of free time.
Yeah.
But no, life finds a way to just keep popping up little things that just bite off hours and hours here and there. So that's been kind of today. Yeah, we were supposed to start, an hour and a half ago?
That's about that, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Time to warm up, I guess.
Keeping rats out of your apartment is possibly more important than talking to me. Just slightly. From a health and safety point of view, at least.
I suppose. Yeah, I guess given health concerns that are circling the globe right now, yeah, certainly. But also, how am I supposed to be in a charming family movie where I become best friends with a rat?
This is true. But the thing is, now you've exterminated and filled all the holes, so...
Oh, that's a good point.
Damn it.
Yeah. So, on top of that, just various other business conversations, sending emails, trying to just hustle up business, really. It's interesting. It's fun.
Well, we're going to get into your new business interests, but I understand you grew up in Texas.
That's correct, yeah. In a very small town in Texas. I think when I grew up there, it had under 10,000 people. It's quite a bit larger than that now. It's actually kind of weird to go back and see what used to just be miles and miles of unkempt forest and woods just now turned into designer homes and stuff. But it was a pretty, I guess the way I look at it is a pretty fairy tale way to grow up. Just a tiny town. There's some things about it weren't so hot. We didn't have good internet for a long time. Didn't have any internet for a long time. The kind of place where the only restaurant in town was a Dairy Queen. That's that may not mean anything to you, but here it's a chain restaurant that sort of only resides in some more rural areas. But it was a cool way to grow up. I feel like it gave me a perspective on certain aspects of North American culture that maybe my other colleagues that grew up entirely in the LA area never got.
Did you have any trouble avoiding tornadoes, or were you far enough away from that kind of weather?
They would crop up from time to time. Yeah, it was that kind of alleyway. We would have pretty intense thunderstorms, and there were a couple of times that as a kid I would have to hide under the stairwell because we were under a tornado warning, which means there's one in the area, but one never really directly hit the area that I lived, so I was pretty lucky there. You
mentioned sort of in a rural area, so was it? Just going to completely show my ignorance here. Was it just like what we like a secondary school and a high school? What kind of subjects were you studying?
It was public education, so it was basically whatever they told me to. There wasn't a whole lot of extracurricular, which is something that I guess maybe one of the drawbacks of living in a rural area. Like we had a math club that I participated in because, of course, we didn't really have like a computer team or anything like that because I certainly would have been on that.
Yeah,
I wasn't in band because my parents didn't want to pay for the instrument. I say didn't want to because now that I'm an adult and I can talk to my mom as an adult, she's leveled with me that they had money the whole time. They just didn't want to spend it.
Thanks, Mom.
So, yeah, basically, yeah. So, no, I wasn't involved in too much extracurricular at school. I think the most applicable thing was in high school, I joined the newspaper staff, so I was that guy. And that's kind of where I got my start learning how to write as a journalist, which, despite what a lot of people on the internet think, journalism is more than just, getting on a blog and telling people what you think about video games.
Yeah.
So it was really beneficial to kind of learn the basics there in that way.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm pretty grateful that we had that. But yeah, apart from that, and I've mentioned this before on like other videos and stuff, but we kind of ended up in a rural area because my father's trying to think of how to say this diplomatically. He's not the biggest fan of either urban areas or dense crowds.
Okay.
And I think because of that, he's sort of we all have our fantasy scenarios and our fantasy settings, right? Like some people want to live in Game of Thrones times and swing a sword and cast magic spells. My dad, his thing is he really, really likes the colonial era of the United States.
Yeah.
And I speculate it's because he appreciates the simplicity and certainly the lower population densities then.
Yeah.
But because of that, and the way that I guess this fantasy enacted itself is he had a colonial music band where he played fiddle and I played an array of instruments. So that ended up taking up a lot of my afternoons and evenings in my junior high and high school days of going around with him playing old-time dances and stuff that would just be at, civic centers and city halls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in a way, given if I hadn't lived through it, I would think it was probably the most idyllic Americana type thing to do. Having been there, though, it's, as somebody who really likes video games, shredding on a mandolin for 4 hours straight is not necessarily the way I would choose to spend my Friday.
My wife, Sarah, would probably think she's in heaven hearing all that. Yeah, she's very, very different to me. She is very much the country girl. She loves nature. She loves being out in the country. I'm very much more of the city boy. Give me, not too bustling, more just give me technology. Give me good internet. Give me somewhere I can plug my computer in, and I'm happy. That was when we were moving house. That was pretty much the discussion we were having. She wanted somewhere quaint in the country, and I'm like, just give me a room big enough to put my stuff. Give me good internet. I will live anywhere.
Oh, it sounds like a good compromise then.
It's taken some time to get there, though.
Oh, yeah.
So, what was your first, for the want of a better word, exposure to video games? When was the first sort of time you heard about video games?
Man, that's a good question. I've tried to track that back myself. The closest I can remember, like when I scrape around in my neurons, there are a couple of experiences I can recall. When I was like 4 or 5, my mom was a teacher. She was a public school teacher. And there was a window in our summer break where she would go back to work, but school wasn't in session yet. In that window, she would take us to daycare, which was... My memory now remembers it pretty horrifically. Basically, I would go into this house with, I want to say, like 30 other kids. I remember it always smelled really bad. They would feed us like bologna and mayonnaise, white bread sandwiches, just like the cheapest stuff. And then we would either sit in a room where all the kids would fight, and I would just kind of try to hide in the corner, or they would shove us outside into the backyard, where there was like one swing set, and the biggest kids got to use that, and I was not one of the biggest kids. The second biggest kids would crawl inside of like barrels that were tipped over, because I guess that was playground equipment. But really, it was just shade, because this is Texas in the summer, so it was like 100 degrees. And then me, who wasn't very aggressive and hadn't hit any growth spurts yet, I would just sort of sit in the dirt and kind of draw things with my finger. I'm saying all that because I do recall that at that daycare center, they did have an Atari 2600. And I think watching one of the older kids play Pitfall on that might have been my first exposure. Before that, I think categorically before that, I remember being in the mall with my parents and seeing an arcade. Yeah. So I remember like just being drawn to it. And for obvious reasons, arcade games, they're bright, they're flashy, they make loud sounds. So as a child, I remember demanding to go in there. And I do remember very explicitly I had to deal with my parents that if I got grades of a certain quality, that they would give me a couple of quarters every weekend.
The good old parenting bargaining tool.
Yeah. And to my knowledge, it worked. Like, that was a powerful motivator. And specifically, it took me years to figure out what the game was. But specifically, I do remember looking at an arcade cabinet for APB, which is like an old Midway arcade game where you play as a cop. So I remember that, and I'm pretty sure that predated the Atari thing. Even before that, though, and this might be the oldest thing, and I only know this because of home video. Like, this predates my conscious memory. I remember, I think I was 2 years old, and I had a toy as a kid that was a computer, but it was just plastic. It wasn't electronic in any way. But you would hit the buttons, and then this screen on rollers would roll behind the plastic screen to, I guess, simulate that things were happening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I remember those, yeah.
Yeah. So even at that age, I had a fascination with like hitting buttons and seeing things happen. And I've read books that kind of verify that that's just part of the human condition.
Yeah.
Something about people. We love to hit a button and then see something happen. You know, like elevators, people really like hitting that button even though it doesn't do anything. Crossing signals, people will just hammer on that thing because it beeps and they like to believe that it's doing something. It's a weird psyche thing, but that's certainly been very strong in me. Yeah, so I think as a 2-year-old, that toy that I had was probably the first like heartbeat between me and video games that has been very strong ever since.
You mentioned earlier that you joined a journalism school. I think that's how you put it. I apologize if I've got that wrong already.
Oh no, it's fine. I joined the journalism team in high school, and we would publish a newspaper every month.
When did the first idea pop for you about marrying your journalism with your video games?
That had predated high school by a fair margin. I had convinced my parents to buy me a subscription to Nintendo Power. I think I went over to. Oh wait, no. I think it was I got an issue of that from a relative as a Christmas gift. Got one issue. And, read it front to back, was enamored with it. Basically was intoxicated by the idea that video games could exist in any other medium. And really that I would have any other path to increase my immersion in them.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have many video games, or really, not many. So really just like anything I could get, I just lapped up entirely. So it was really like reading gaming magazines back in the late 80s and early 90s that first put the idea in my head that it might be possible to earn a living doing anything remotely connected to video games.
Yeah.
But then as I grew up, and my concept of the world started to take a little more shape, I realized that, and again, this is pre-YouTube, pre-video game streaming, pre-video on the internet. There were really only two paths: be a game developer or be a games writer. And I had aptitude with tech and was already programming. Like I inherited a Commodore 64 from my grandmother and was like writing games in BASIC on that. So I was kind of doing both the whole time. I recall, in junior high, I was writing games in BASIC, but I also got a book on HTML from a used bookstore and then made my own website. And then this is going to some weird places, but one of the dudes in my Jedi Knight 2 clan at the time had set up a web server, and he just broke off like 200 megabytes. So with that, I uploaded my own HTML files and started writing my own game reviews because I saw, that people had done that in magazines.
Yeah.
So my plan, such as it was, pretty much ever since I was in junior high, was that I was going to pursue either being a game developer or a game writer, somebody covering games media, and just see which one worked out first.
What was the point that you went, the journalism side is the way I'm going to go down now?
That's a good question. So I had pursued both pretty much all throughout graduating college. I got a degree in computer science, thinking that basically I need to pay my bills one way or the other. So at the time, and this is probably still true today, it seemed much more likely that I would get a paying job being a game developer before I would get a paying job being a person writing about games.
Yeah.
So I got a degree in computer science. All throughout college, I was also writing for the college paper, and I was also submitting like free volunteer writing to various gaming websites, just to get practice, just one of those things that I just had to do, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess the decision moment kind of came when I was a couple of years out of college, and I had a job as a software developer. It wasn't in gaming though. It was at a banking software company.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing super well there. The work the technical aspect I was fine at. Like I had no problem coding and stuff like that. It was more I don't want to get too much in the weeds on it, but I had been moved from a team that was doing system level coding to doing more customization coding and higher level stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get along with my team there, which is kind of my fault. I was much of a frumpy or nerd back then, which is kind of hard to imagine, but it's true. Interpersonal skills were not good at all. Turns out playing games and writing articles does not prepare you to work on a team or to be, generally not insufferable to be around, which I totally was. But, that did make me very socially happy. And then also it was just like, it was a job that, it had crunch time. We were like customizing software for a bank in Wisconsin at the time. And I was working like 12-hour days and going back to my hotel room and just kind of sitting there alone, feeling very, very sort of deserted. I remember I got a job interview at Aspire, which is, at the time, it's headquartered in Austin, Texas, and I think it still might be.
Yeah.
It was the first job offer I got. It was, QA. That's where everyone needs to start, I guess. And I remember going, and they asked me questions that sounded like they were interviewing somebody who was, like, on high school break. And meanwhile, I had a full-time coding job already. And they were asking me questions like, well, what kind of job do you think this is? And they were like, well, you're not just going to grab a video game off the shelf and play it all day. I was like, yeah, I know. There's going to be support tickets. I'm going to have to, like, evaluate software. I've written and done test cases already. And then they gave me a job offer, and it was for Texas state minimum wage, which at the time I think was $6.25 an hour. And I was actually really considering taking it just to get out of the career I was in. But that would involve moving to a new city and probably massively going into debt, taking a minimum wage job and living in a crappy apartment. I was nearly prepared to do it, but I had also just like a week before re-signed the lease on my apartment in Dallas. So I would have had to pay my way out of that. And really, like all those factors combined, I just couldn't justify it.
Yeah.
And then a few months after that, I had found another opportunity with work. I had switched from a full-time programming job to a contracting role. Again, the plan there being that, like, I found myself, I was working 45, 50 hours a week. I was earning, a software developer's salary as a single person in Dallas with a modest apartment. I actually had money stacking up in my bank account that I didn't have anything to use for it. Like, I couldn't buy more time off of work, which is what I really wanted. I just wanted to play video games and write about video games. So I left that job, went to a contracting position where I could just bill hourly, which is perfect. Now I can work like 20 hours a week and invest the extra time into playing and covering video games.
Yeah.
And kind of shortly after that, I did find an opportunity at a website that would basically pay on commission. So however many hits your article got, they would share a portion of that ad revenue with you, which was my first kind of paid writing gig ever. And to me, that was it. Like, okay, this is what's happened. I finally have a paying role doing this, and that has somehow come together faster than getting into game dev. Also, by virtue of writing about games more and learning more about the industry, I did kind of learn more about the conditions by which people develop games.
Yeah.
And it became pretty clear, and honestly in a selfish kind of way, that it was much more preferable to play video games and talk about them than it was to make them. Because people that make them have to endure some pretty raunchy conditions, and they just get shit on by the audience all the time. Meanwhile, the people who play the games and joke about them are beloved by the audience and typically don't have to deal with a bunch of really angry people just screaming at them for making the thing that they ostensibly love. So all of that combined meant that I'd been sort of nudged down the track of games media as opposed to game development.
Your style of writing, your style of what now is style of presenting, was that something that came sort of straight away, or was it sort of as a result of trial and error?
Definitely trial and error. I don't think... let me think how to phrase this. Like, writing, creative expression, it's not a hard skill. Like, you can't get a mathematical grade on how likable you are on camera. Actually, to an extent, you can now, based on like view counts and up votes and down votes and positive and negative sentiment and comments. Still, It is something you do kind of have to just practice and learn through trial and error, which is basically what I did. It was a process of... The thing I think that benefited me the most is actually watching myself on camera, which is awful. It's the worst. Nobody likes doing it because you're kind of forced to acknowledge how you come across as opposed to how you think you come across.
Yeah.
And in doing that, going through that particular hell, I was able to identify a lot of behaviors and speech patterns and things that I hated about myself that I could then try to forcefully change. But in terms of writing, I think what also helped too with that is editing a ton of my own and other people's writing. In the website I mentioned previously, the one that was commission based, after I'd written there for about a year, they offered me a role of reviews director. And as part of that role, I guess it wasn't explicit, but I sort of took the responsibility on myself to edit down everyone's reviews.
Yeah.
To tighten up the wording, to fix grammatical and spelling mistakes, which there were several. And to just, I guess, also sort of give tone guidance. And that's something that I did for maybe 2 to 3 hours every night, was just combing through loads and loads and loads of writing, and hopefully improving it. That was the idea. But I think those things combined, like, once you see both the mistakes that you make and then the mistakes that other people make, and you're immersed in them, it's not just like one evening of like, I have found the one thing I need to improve. It is really just grinding out hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
I think all of that experience combined to sort of, I guess, formulate what my style is now. I think laid on top of what I consider some deep philosophical beliefs about what gaming is, how it should be represented, and the role of games media in general.
Hopefully, if I've done my research right, we're just going to come on to Machinima. You joined Machinima January 2011. Does that sound about right?
Full time? That sounds... Yes. That sounds close. That sounds close to correct. I'd actually started working for them in, I think, around 2009 as a freelance writer.
Yeah. So up to the point of, say, 2009, this crafting your style, learning from your mistakes, this had been happening for a good decade. This is something that you've been working on and refining.
Yeah, that's about right.
I'm assuming that there were times you were like, this just isn't going to happen for me.
Oh, of
I'm
course.
not going to make it. How did you get over those moments?
That's a good question. I guess it comes down to motivation. I told myself or promised myself early on that I wasn't doing any of it to achieve any metric of success. I was doing it just because I wanted to, because it was fun, because I would be doing it if I were the only person on the planet, which would be difficult because nobody would be there to make games. But yeah, I told myself pretty early on that it was in the realm of something that I loved so much that I didn't need to depend on any external factor to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Now, certainly, I had a lot of hopes riding on it because the ideal situation is to get paid doing what you love, right?
Yeah.
I can recall a specific circumstance where it was so they did GDC in Austin a bit. I can't remember what it was branded before, but then it became GDC Online, and then they just stopped because I guess turnout wasn't super hot. But I remember one of the years that I was writing for one of the many volunteer blogs that I'd written for. It was happening. I applied for press credentials. They approved me for some reason. And then, I just hopped in the car and drove down there. Paid for my own hotel and just walked around the convention and just sort of went to panels and just wrote about whatever I could. And I remember kind of being there and wondering, like, how weird would it be to get paid to do this? And also kind of surrounded by other writers who were being paid to do it. Yeah. And wondering what the difference was, if it would ever happen. What makes those recollections absolutely surreal is that that's the same building that then RTX would happen in. Where I would go back as a very kind of microcosm celebrity in that building. And just the two experiences were only separated by less than 6 years, I want to say. But the conditions of being in that building could not be more different. And I honestly, I don't know, a combination of luck and hard work, I guess. But to go back to your original question, even in that moment, thinking like, what if this never happens? I wonder if it ever will. Also knowing that even if it doesn't, it's something that I'm just going to keep doing anyway. Yeah. So I guess, and that's what I've come to understand about any role that has a lot of competition. So, actor, a YouTuber, streamer, games media writer. If everyone in the world wants to do it, you kind of have to get into it being okay with never attaining a level of success just because of the raw amount of competition. Yeah. Because if you go into it needing the success, you will eventually burn out. And I saw that happen plenty of times, even back in writing. And that's, I guess, one of those, to even link it back to what we were talking about before this, is a lesson learned from watching other people. is that there were a lot of people who would volunteer for writing blogs. They'd do it for about a year, and then their attitude and their tone would shift. They'd become a little more bitter. They'd act out a lot more. They'd feel like they were due certain breaks, but I think a lot of this was so emotional that they didn't really even know what that was or what they wanted. But having to deal with a lot of those people, I shouldn't say, saying those people sounds so negative, but just seeing that process happen multiple times, I guess I sort of realized that this is a cycle that happens and that I need to monitor my own emotional investment and my own emotional state to make sure I don't get to that point.
So you mentioned that you were doing freelance writing for Machinima. Was that game reviews again, or was that other articles for them?
It started out with game reviews. The full story, such as my understanding, is that Machinima wanted to get listed on Metacritic. Yeah. And the story as it was told to me, so this is secondhand / hearsay, but they called somebody at Metacritic, John Metacritic, whatever. They said, we're Machinima and you should put us on your website. And then they were laughed at and said, well, maybe once you have 200 written reviews. My understanding is that Metacritic said it in jest, but then Machinima said, fine, we'll go get 200 reviews. So they went to basically beat the freelance writer drum to just get reviews about whatever. Yeah. And here's the cool bit, because this is actually kind of my quote-unquote break, is that one of the people that I had written with on a volunteer site years ago was then working for Machinima. And, boy, this is extra weird, I had just gotten dismissed from the website that I was writing for at the time for reasons that I still don't quite understand. I suspect it has to do with my being more of an insufferable nerd then, and probably being a little too heated and passionate about some gaming shit that didn't matter. But yeah, it's like there was a call and I was, I can't remember the phrasing. I don't know. I was upset at the time, given how much time and effort I had invested into editing everyone's writing and trying to make everything run well there. But was basically told that, they didn't need me to work with them anymore. So essentially, I had kind of hit up all the writers that I had good connections with at that website that I just got dismissed from, saying like, hey, if you guys hear about anything, let me know. One of them wrote back saying, hey, this guy actually is looking for writers. He says he knows you. I was like, wow, that's cool. So yeah, it turned out to be one of my old then kind of associates, now I would consider friend, and said, hey, yeah, we're looking for reviews of all kinds. The rate was incredible. I think it was $50 per review. And I was like, oh my God, this is almost cash neutral. I can basically play video games for free. Holy crap. And yeah, that's kind of how that started. Apparently Machinima just needed a stack of written reviews and I was there willing to grind them out. Yeah. So that was, that I guess was my break, because then I think 6 months later, then they wanted to launch a news blog. And I was the one that they approached with that. They basically asked me to write 10 news articles a day for $10 each. And that was it. That was the moment that I could pay all my bills doing gaming writing, news articles plus just grinding out reviews, and I could just about cover all my bills. So that was when I had made it. That moment. That was the moment I didn't think would ever happen.
But it took a very long time to get there.
Of course, yes. It doesn't feel like a long time if you're not counting the days, So I had no expectation of reaching that moment. I just was like, it would be nice if I got there someday. So when it happened, it was a little bit surreal, but that, obviously wasn't the end of everything.
Nah. The reason I mentioned it was a long time, because what's really interesting is a lot of what you're saying mirrors very closely to what Daniel O'Dwyer told me, and about just constantly working at it and just keep going and keep writing, keep doing what you're doing, keep building up that portfolio, because that's the only way you give yourself a chance to make it.
Yeah, it can be a little dangerous though, if I'm being honest, because if I heard that when I was starting out, that almost makes it sound like if you just keep at it, success will find you eventually.
Yeah, oh no, that's not what I meant. I'm really sorry.
I know not. I'm trying to clarify for the sake of me and maybe people that are really, really hungry to get into this kind of work.
Yeah. In the same, from the streaming perspective, I hear a lot of people go, keep getting at it and it will find you. And my immediate reaction is, no, keep at it and you'll probably increase your chances, but that's as far as it's going to go.
That's exactly right. It's one thing I've come to understand is that everyone gets a shot to roll the dice, whether or not they know. They do. There are times when people see what's being put out there. There are times when individuals come up for consideration, and if you've put in the time and have a good reputation and represent yourself well, you'll get incremental opportunities. But if you haven't put in that bank of time and you haven't cultivated that skill, then when your shots do come, even if you don't see them, then you won't be prepared for them. So it's an intersection of a lot of things, and it can be tough. The grand mystery, I think, the grand illusion, is that no one sees anyone when they're bad, because bad people just fade away.
Yeah.
So when I was a bad writer, nobody read what I was writing, and they shouldn't have, because it was bad. When I got better, then maybe some people started noticing. But the illusion is that when you start noticing, that's when suddenly somebody appears in your mind, not the 5 years before when they were just doing it in the shadows.
Yeah.
So it is a little unfortunate and a little unfair that all the time spent grinding and cultivating skill is never visible. What only is ever visible is the end product. And when somebody's really good at something, it looks effortless. And then the grand illusion is then, well, if they can do it, then I can do it, right? It's that easy.
Yeah.
And it truly isn't.
Yeah, I've heard that said so many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, to me, it's like you're setting yourself and setting others up to fail, which is really not fair on everyone involved.
Yeah, a little bit. And then it just starts the cycle, where people get into it, and then they get frustrated that they're not seeing the same level of success they perceive in others. And then they, burn out or lash out, or, it's rough. It's very rough.
So when you joined Machinima full time, what was your primary role within Machinima?
Oh, man. They hired me to send out a newsletter every day. That was my job, is to make and send out a newsletter. The idea was that, I don't know why in 2010 they thought this was a good idea, but they were paying me to do it, so whatever. They would send out the Inside Gaming newsletter. Yeah. And if they could put an ad in those newsletters and 50,000 people a day look at that newsletter, then boom, that's mega money, is how it was explained to me.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that, even in 2010, people weren't using email anymore. I knew that, but that doesn't matter. That was my job. So I got in there and I basically wrote the newsletter every day. The idea was that it would promote, whatever Inside Gaming videos we put out. It would point to the blog to drive up traffic there, to whatever reviews or news articles we were posting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got really good at using MailChimp, and would basically just, throwing back to getting a used HTML book. I would write all the newsletters in HTML because it was just faster and easier that way. I would make my own templates and just edit them every day and send them out. Got to where I could do that within like an hour of getting into the office. And then I had nothing to do. So I started picking up other tasks, which kind of leads into the other stuff that I started doing.
What was that other stuff?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to remember. In the early days, it's tough, actually. I'm trying to think of what filled my days. The most important roles that I eventually picked up were basically collating notes for Inside Gaming, the show. So when I started there, Adam Kovic was making Inside Gaming as a weekly actual Machinima, like lowercase m Machinima show.
Yeah.
So he would record it in Halo and then edit it and turn it into bits and things like that. Shortly after I started there, I'm trying to remember the specific date. I actually looked this up to make a montage video when we relaunched Inside Gaming about a year ago. But I'm blanking on it now. Anyway, once it went daily, this was like a daily gaming news show. I can't remember exactly how I started doing this, but I just started putting together like a list of stories. Just as kind of like hey, I've got the time, here's something that I can do. So I would basically in like Google Docs put together a list of stories of links, and I would send them to Adam and then Matt Danovic, who was the co-host at the time. Yeah. And they would just kind of read through it and kind of offer commentary. To kind of make it easier, I would start to break out all the stories by like bullet points. So for each story, I'd put like 3 bullets of the most important factors there. After a while, I started adding more and more information, and before long, it started turning into a script. And then before long after that, I was basically writing the script for every show. Yeah. Or rather, I would script out the news beats, and then they would improvise and add jokes and stuff like that. So that was kind of the formula that got hit on. And then, yeah, that became kind of the more important role that I had, in addition to still sending out the newsletter, which never really got off the ground.
Did they abandon the newsletter in the end?
Yes, I think that finally died when I quit. And I think that was around 2012. I quit the first time. Yeah, I think that finally went away. Yeah, well, I mean, I quit again in 2014 to join Rooster Teeth. So, yeah, two stints at Machinima, weirdly.
If it's okay to ask, what prompted the first one?
No, it's totally fine to ask. A combination of factors. Basically, I could kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit at Machinima. The money was running out. And it's fascinating because it's the first time I've seen this cycle happen, and I've seen it happen a couple of times since. Yeah. Where a company will hit on an idea. You know, for Machinima, it was like Call of Duty gameplays. They accidentally sort of harness this lightning in a bottle, and they write it to a lot of performance, a lot of numbers. And then they use that number to get a lot of investment capital, and then everything's great. Man, it's so easy to spend somebody else's money. So you get to say yes to everything. You get to do everything. And at the time, Machinima was biting off just tons of weird little projects. I remember they were trying to open their own like game affiliate store through Best Buy. They were trying to like make their own social network through Facebook. Like they were doing a lot of stuff. Yeah. But once a lot of those projects didn't bear any fruit, and a lot of the other fact, man, maybe I'm getting a little too in the weeds on this, but also like hiring is just dudes will hire their friends will hire their friends, and then you just get whole groups of friends that just hang out together at work, and they don't really do much. I could kind of see once the money started running out and people started to have to be like accountable for the way they were spending money and time, then the tone started to shift. And I could kind of tell that, well, I knew layoffs were coming. Like I could kind of feel it in the water. And I kind of looked around and realized I wasn't on camera. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew my name. I had an important role, but it was like very easy to be ignored because I was a writer. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm probably going to get laid off. That was kind of the push factor of being like, okay, the ride here I feel like is about to be over. The pull factor too was that I was still kind of homesick for the Dallas area. And my girlfriend at the time, we had talked about it and basically said that, you know, we do want to have a life together, but we probably want to have it back in Dallas next with our families, and where housing is affordable and all this stuff. So the life plan was basically that we'd move back to Dallas, start a family. And that's kind of what led to my decision to be like, hey, I'm out. Oh, another big factor was like I had been biting off all these new responsibilities and stuff. Yeah. And yearly reviews came around, and my boss at the time invited me and was like, hey, bud, like whenever a conversation starts like that, you know it's bad. Gave me the whole song and dance of like, I really tried, but there's just no money, dog. And like he just wasn't even making eye contact, like couldn't even bother to try to sell the lie that he didn't give a shit. Yeah. And like I think it was like a 3% raise or something like that. It was insultingly small on top of the fact they were already paying me next to nothing. Which, when I first moved out there to make a newsletter, okay, I get not getting paid a lot. But I was now writing the like banner show, and to be fair, I also didn't really stick up for myself because I was already kind of done with that company. But once they had kind of thrown a non-raise in front of me, I was like, okay, you guys don't value me. You've made no effort to understand what I'm doing here. I don't want to work on this team. Mm-hmm. So yeah, all those factors combined, I was like, you know what, there's no future here for me. I'm just gonna bone out. So yeah, quit, moved back to Texas, and there were some roles, specifically the writing role, that they didn't have anyone to replace me with. So I kept doing that as a contracting position, remotely. Yeah, they said they were going to replace me, and then they just never did, which was good for me. Kept money coming in. But yeah, that's how that transition happened. Yeah. So did you end up going back full time, or were you stayed as a contractor? I did eventually, yeah. So in 2013, I worked as a contractor. I was writing the show every day. Eventually, I started being a character on the show. There's an incident I remember where, like, basically what would happen is I would write the script, and since I was in Central Time and they were in Pacific, I was 2 hours ahead, which was great. That meant if I got up at like 9 or 10 and started writing, they weren't even in the office yet. And when they hit the office at 9, it was 11 for me, and I already had a script for them. So we would have a call where they'd talk through the script. Bruce Green was the producer at the time, actually. And he would like ask questions to clarify the script. They would like kind of go over the script and like fire off some jokes, and I would script in the jokes that they wrote, just as like little hooks to give them jumping off points for improv and stuff like that. Yeah. And typically I would just hang up and go on about my day doing whatever other contracting writing I had. I think at the time I was generating website copy for a construction equipment rental website.
A bit different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was a writer. I was like, I'll take any work I can get. And then like there was something else of just like writing copy for web pages designed to grab Google search traffic for foot doctors in various cities and stuff like that. The interesting challenge there was working non-grammatically correct phrases into like block copy and making it work somehow. But no, I digress. So yeah, those were the other tasks. And also at the time I was kind of starting to teach myself video editing just so I could ask for more work from Machinima, basically. But there was one day where we did our call, and I think they forgot to hang up, or I forgot to hang up. One of us forgot to hang up.
Yeah.
And I muted my mic and was just listening to them record the show. And then at one point during the show, they had said something wrong. They'd gotten like a date wrong or attributed a game to a publisher wrong or something like that. And I was like, oh crap. And I unmuted my mic and was like, hey, you said something wrong. And they were like, what the hell? And they were like, oh, okay. And they were like, okay, cool. Thanks for saying that. And I guess because of that one catch, then Bruce was like, no, stay on and listen. And then Bruce started throwing to me, like started asking me questions.
Yeah.
Which is like, and that's kind of how I became like a weird Pee Wee Herman side character in Inside Gaming is accidentally, by my recollection, accidentally one day, I stayed on the line during the recording and was able to kind of stop a mistake from going through. And then because of that, started getting on-camera experience, which was pretty cool.
How did you find that to start with?
I mean, it's intimidating, but I probably had the safest way possible of dabbling my toes in. Because I did some on-camera stuff when I was at Machinima the first time, and it's not good at all. It's very, very bad. Plus, not to mention, I was like at least 60 pounds heavier back then. So, yeah, I mean, everyone's bad at something the first time they do it.
Yeah. Being
able to just be audio only, and also with the benefit of editing, I think I was able to kind of there were a number of safety nets put on my exposure to being on camera or in front of an audience first. So if people can't see me, then they get to just kind of assume what I look like, and people are usually pretty generous in their mind's eye. That also means that like all of the weird kind of nervous tics that people have that make them not read well on camera, none of those mattered. I got to do all that by myself alone. I got to be in a comfortable place, like as just sitting at my computer with a microphone in front of me. So yeah, I don't know how intentional that was, but it really did give me a really good advantage when trying to pick up those skills of being introduced that way.
When did you meet Bruce and Adam face to face? Was it your first stint or your second stint at Machinima?
Both first. So let's see here. I think it was 2009 was the first time I went out to LA for the Inside Gaming Awards. And amusingly, at the time, Machinima was like 3 months late paying my invoices, so I couldn't afford to rent a car. So I basically got off the plane, walked from LAX airport to a train station after trying to rent a car and them telling me I needed to put down a down payment I couldn't afford. So then I took the trains all the way up into Hollywood, which I was pretty proud of myself for figuring out how to do. And then basically went to the awards show. Didn't really have a role there. They just flew me out, which was pretty cool of them.
Yeah.
But that's where I met Adam the first time, pretty sure. I recall at that award show, tried to avail myself to whatever degree I could. And I ended up taking a bunch of promotional headphones out of the wrappers and hooking them up to Xboxes and stuff. I think there was some promo agreement with, I don't know, Turtle Beach or something like that. So basically like shredded my hands pulling open clamshells all night. But that's fine. There was an open bar. So I got paid in the end.
Makes everything worth it.
Basically, yeah. But yeah, that was the first face-to-face I think I ever had with Adam. And then, we worked together a little more closely when I moved to LA to be full-time. And then somewhere in my first stint working at Machinima, Bruce Green got hired on. But he was hired on as a producer for ETC, which was the entertainment and tech show that was produced at Machinima. Yeah. So it didn't work directly with him right away. He had worked with Kale Anonymous on ETC for a while. It was when somewhere in the gap between when I quit and left, he was then put as the producer on Inside Gaming and then was working with him remotely while I was in Texas. And then when I moved back to LA, I was working directly with him because he was my supervisor for Inside Gaming. So yeah.
I appreciate that this next question you might not be able to answer much on, But we can't really mention Machinima, unfortunately, without mentioning the whole paid advertising controversy.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
What was that like to see all that unfold from inside the company you were working for, even though you weren't actually responsible for the controversy itself?
Sure. I mean, unfortunately, that wasn't the first time something like that had happened. When that started hitting, we were pretty used to being called to account for some of the decisions that the company was making that we weren't in charge of.
Yeah.
By then, Machinima was already not doing so hot in terms of its audience relations. I think they had a number of problems with creators where they would lock them into very predatory contracts. And they were just publishing a bunch of media that nobody wanted. This was kind of part of their "we have money, so let's do everything" initiatives.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about media companies, but the second they get money, they all want to make movies. Movies or TV or so, I don't know. I feel like every producer, every manager, once they get a check, they feel like it's their ticket to write it into like the Hollywood production ecosystem, whatever. All those conversations happened well above my pay grade, so I'm not really qualified to comment on them. Maybe there is sound reasoning behind it. But certainly, as an armchair commentator, it looks a lot like just egos thrashing around. For the FTC thing, that was probably the most severe instance of the company mismanaging something, and then us kind of being pushed out in front to talk about it.
Yeah.
The biggest problem was that we had to say something, but everything we said was intensely scrutinized by the company and executives that didn't have to. Like, their reputations weren't riding on it, but ours were. So it was tough being caught in the crossfire there of wanting to be open and honest with the audience and frankly wanting to say, listen, these guys fucked up. And we have nothing to do with that. But, that's not an answer that satisfies anybody. So, we basically just had to acknowledge it as diplomatically as possible. And then I guess the most frustrating thing was having to pass our wording through a bunch of executives that got to hide behind the faces of the company.
Yeah.
Like, they got to choose what we were and weren't allowed to say. Well, I don't have a lot of visibility on what actually happened there, apart from, just being in the room when a lot of those conversations were happening.
Yeah.
All I can say is from my perspective, and I didn't have it as bad as like Adam or Bruce, who were, directly in front of the camera and directly representing the brand. I was just kind of a side character. Nobody was really looking to me for answers. I was just there to sort of try to write and pave the way and make it easier for everyone. So for me, it was frustrating seeing people like Adam and Bruce and people who had the best of intentions be called to account for the utter mistakes of others.
Yeah.
But it was a good learning experience too, of just seeing how that system works. How some people can play very fast and loose with the rules and then pretty much escape any serious consequences.
Yeah, that's always the way. It's always the higher-ups that use the employees as shields.
Oh, of course. And that happens in more ways than are even visible, like the FTC thing. I mean, at a certain point, Machinima... One of the things that was fascinating to me is that the game of Machinima, and to a degree the game of any startup company, is to appear as valuable as possible and then get acquired at the height of the appearance of your value. At a certain point, it was very clear that peak had come and gone for Machinima, which is also the downturn that I was talking about of like, once the valuation started slipping and nobody knew how to turn it around or make the company actually make money anymore, then it was pretty clear that it was going to be a long slide. And like, who could they convince to buy the company for what? And then it was this weird kind of Mexican standoff between the owners who really wanted to make a lot of money and investors who kind of realized that as time went on, the company would just be cheaper and cheaper to acquire.
Yeah.
And in the middle of all that, you have people who are trying to do honest work and actually make a career. But nobody, like none of the executives give a shit about that. They don't care about the people who are actually making the content, amusingly, because that is the main product of the company. No, they're just in it for the money game of it, which, once I came to realize that, it was somber, or a sobering realization, but it did kind of change my perspective about how a lot of that is done. Hence, when the FTC thing comes around, it wasn't that much of a shock, because I was like, yeah, it makes sense that this is where most people's heads are at. They don't care about like doing the right thing or being honest with consumers. They just care about closing big deals, making the books look good, and then either getting their vested options from this company or riding the ride and then getting a signing bonus with another startup company that they can say that, they'll spin gold and make everyone a ton more money. So
yeah,
it's just part of the game, unfortunately.
Was that whole mess, to put it mildly, was that sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back for you for the second time and saying, nah, I need out of here?
Not really, because, I don't know, again, by that point, I think we had already long come to the conclusion that Machinima was not a company that was going to last any amount of time, or that really had any career potential for us.
Okay.
And now that you're asking, I realize how that might be a bigger event from the outside. But we were working there every day. We got to see executives talk and what they cared about and what they were spending time on. So long before the FTC thing kind of hit the fan, it was very clear to us that there was no future at that company.
Yeah. At what stage did you get wind, or how did to come on to your next stage of your career, how did the Rooster Teeth opportunity come about?
Unfortunately, a lot of that happened outside of my visibility. My understanding is that there were just conversations that Adam had with a bunch of the people at Rooster Teeth. They got along very well. The creative culture at Rooster Teeth was a lot more similar to what I guess super early days Machinima was.
Yeah.
They seemed much more invested in the actual quality of the content they were making, seemed more invested in running a business responsibly. Again, this is all secondhand. I was not involved in any of these conversations, but at a certain point, my understanding is that when Fullscreen acquired Rooster Teeth, then Rooster Teeth had the operating capital to start making bigger money moves, like hiring 7 people at a drop and making a new brand. So it was that, combined with the fact that we were all pretty ready to get out of Machinima. We were just looking for a way to do it, and also kind of try to keep the team together, because we kind of identified that we had really good team chemistry. And at the time, we were discussing just flat going independent, just staking out, trying to raise some investment capital and starting our own production company. But I think we had some pretty. I remember having some pretty passionate talks about what the right way to go was.
Yeah. And
we eventually decided that, the Rooster Teeth's culture was a better fit for what we were doing, and that we could, once we had come to the agreement that they would hire everybody, it was kind of the best deal, is that we can go to a company that values us, and we can keep our team chemistry together and keep doing what we're already doing.
I was just about to ask, from your perspective and understanding, was it almost like an all or nothing deal? It's like, Rooster Teeth want us, you have all of us, or you have none of us?
I hesitate to answer that definitively, because that is pretty specifically what somebody else would have been saying. My understanding, though, is that yes. I want to say Bruce probably wanted to keep everyone together. Which is not to say nobody else did.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, I just want to be careful about, because at that point I am speaking on behalf of others in situations I absolutely wasn't in.
No, but, that's fine. That's fine. It's fully understandable.
Yeah, I can say that I think we all collectively identified that we had really good work chemistry together, and we were making some really good content, and we all definitely agreed that we wanted to keep that chemistry going.
So you get into Rooster Teeth. Did you move back to LA?
I had moved back to LA before that, actually. So I think at the end of 2013 is when I kind of moved back to LA. So I'd previously mentioned a girlfriend, starting a family. Well, that didn't happen, and that's one of the bigger reasons that I moved back to LA. Is that we had gotten married and had been married for about 4 or 5 months, and nearly immediately everything fell apart. It turns out that the relationship just wasn't doing super well, or rather that my partner at the time was really not feeling it, but that the wedding was maybe covering up a lot of those feelings. Yeah. And once that had come and gone, then suddenly the reality set in that this was what the relationship was going to be, and she decided she didn't want that. So I was pretty heartbroken at the time, and basically decided to double down on the one thing I had going, which was work. I had friends back in LA. I had friends in Dallas too, and they're still my dear friends. But I really wanted something to sort of throw myself into. And to do that, I would have to move back to LA to kind of really double down on that career path.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of something to give me initiative, something to give me drive again. Because I felt pretty emotionally drained, I think pretty understandably. So got divorced, packed all my stuff into my car, whatever I could carry, drove out to LA, got a studio apartment and just sort of started over. And I think that was in late 2013, early 2014. Was still at Machinima at the time, and basically spent all of 2014 at Machinima, and then left there to start at Rooster Teeth in 2015.
Did Rooster Teeth have any specific requests on the type of content they wanted you to make, or was it a case of you guys know what you're good at, go do that?
So just to be clear, again, a lot of those conversations they happened over my head, or rather, I wasn't in the room for them.
Yeah.
I can paraphrase. I had heard that Rooster Teeth was concerned about having 2 Let's Play brands because they already had Achievement Hunter.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was concern of like, well, why would we start an identical channel of people who just yell at video games? But we made the case that our content was different enough, or that they could exist side by side, which is actually proven to be true. It's actually pretty cool to watch that we can attract different enough audiences, even though from the top-down view they look very similar. So there was that. The only other guidance we had was that we had, so it's kind of weird to talk about. Inside Gaming, when we left Machinima, was actually 2 different things. We had Inside Gaming Daily, which was our daily news show, and then James, Bruce, and Adam had started doing comedy gameplays that were also called Inside Gaming.
Okay.
Yeah. The Inside Gaming Daily was on the Machinima YouTube channel, and the Inside Gaming YouTube channel is what held all of the comedy gameplays. So essentially, we had two big products that were both doing really well.
And both called Inside Gaming.
Yeah, kind of. It was all under the same Inside Gaming brand because it had the same personalities in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we went to Rooster Teeth, then the gameplay aspect of Inside Gaming became FunHaus. And the news portion of it, which is what I was more involved in, then got wrapped into The Know, which was Rooster Teeth's gaming editorial brand. So that was kind of the guidance there of like, well, we already have an editorial brand, and we definitely don't need 2 gaming news shows. So you're going to be working with this brand in that way.
Yeah. So you had a wide variety of tasks and options. You said you had the Funhouse, which was the guys playing the games and the chatting, and then you had the news side of things. I can imagine that it must have been very demanding schedule.
Yeah, it was. It's one of the abilities that served me pretty well is the ability to pick up new skills whenever I need to. So I guess, over the course of those 4 to 5 years, I was writing a daily news show. I taught myself video editing, so I started editing gameplays. And then once we started a Funhouse, I would still hybridize in that way. I would write news stories for The Know, and then I would edit down gameplays for the Funhouse channel. And the task switching is pretty intense, and there was a lot to get done. But it was really exciting work. It was fun to be able to operate it at that capacity on a team of people who were also operating at that capacity. Yeah.
When did the sketches? Because I know this was sort of fairly later on, but that Arizona Circle. Mm-hmm. When did the interest in doing that come up? Was it who pitched the idea? Do you remember at all?
Well, I think it's been pretty consistent that the interest in doing sketch comedy or just more general comedy has largely been with James and Elise Willems. They had always, I think, seen the gameplay aspect as a vehicle for the comedy, and comedy is the real passion there. And to that degree, it works wonderfully. I think approaching gameplays with a comedy first mindset really helped differentiate the content and continues to do so. So I think that desire was always there. In fact, if you look back at some of the earlier Funhouse content, you can find pure comedy sketches that James wrote. And it was the sort of thing where it was meant to just be quick, like one-off burner kind of videos, just to kind of start getting our feet wet. But yeah, I remember we would have sketches where we would have to rotate whoever was on camera and whoever was operating the equipment. So in a given shot, if 3 people are in front of the camera, then the other 2 who aren't on camera at the time had to hold the boom and operate the camera, and then we'd rotate around for the next shot. So essentially, like, everyone had to do everything because we just didn't have people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always kind of been there. It's just, I think it's the problem of sketch comedy just doesn't perform super well on YouTube, especially given the time and effort required to make it happen.
Yeah.
You can have 3 people sit down in front of an old game for 1 hour, just make fun of it, put it through a 1-day edit. Well, we had 1-day edits back then. Put it up on YouTube, it gets 250,000 views. You can spend 4 hours with 8 people filming a sketch, put it through a 2-day edit, put it on YouTube, it gets 80,000 views. So the hours in and revenue out just made it a really tough call to continue making that kind of content. So I think the idea was, like, if we could make enough money, then we have the free time to play and make the content that is maybe closer creatively to what certain people wanted to make.
Yeah.
But I think to another degree, too, we are also kind of victims of our own ambition, in that we want to do really well. We want to get a lot of views. We want to make a lot of money. So in some ways, it was hard for us to justify to ourselves continuing to make that kind of content. But it's always been there. It just not a lot of people saw it. But yeah, there are some sketches that you can catch on the FunHaus channel that were published around 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And I think you can see a lot of the DNA of what would eventually become Arizona Circle in there.
Given that you get a group of very creative people together, how did you deal with any disagreements? Because I'm assuming, was there a head that made the final decision, or did you all sort of, once you eventually got a consensus, yeah, this is what we're going to go and do?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a head. It was always Bruce Green. He was kind of the shot caller, and I can't speak for everyone, but I certainly always respected his take because it was right most of the time.
Yeah.
And he was always very good about acknowledging the practical realities of the work, as opposed to maybe what a lot of us maybe wanted it to be. So yeah, essentially the way it would work is if any of us had any idea for content, we'd go to Bruce about it. Say, like, here's what I think. He would say, okay, we can do that, but here are some things to be aware of.
Yeah.
And then, we'd fine-tune the idea or change the production to make it more efficient or make it more clickable on YouTube, something like that. We'd record it. It'd go into edit. Bruce would assign the editor. This is in the early days. Bruce would assign the editor. They'd do their edit passes. Bruce would sit down, watch down the whole video, leave notes on everything. The editor would then address those notes. Bruce would do another watch down and then approve the video. So essentially, he was kind of quality control for the entire channel, which was a lot. I mean, you talk about me. I had a couple of tests, sure. He had to do everything. So yeah, he's always shouldered quite a bit.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize that Bruce was the head of everything. That's actually news to me. I've learned something.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't like go out of his way to say that.
Yeah.
And it's not really a dynamic that made its way into videos all that often. But yeah, he would basically put in the hours to make sure that everything hit a certain level of quality and hit a certain creative vision that I think we all agreed on. So yeah, he put in a lot of time that I don't think a lot of people really acknowledge.
Again, you may not have been privy to these discussions, but I'm assuming once the opportunity to get Inside Gaming daily within Rooster Teeth and have you guys do it again, I'm assuming that was an opportunity that you all jumped at, or was there a little bit of hesitation of, do we really want to go back to this brand?
Oh no, I was 100% on board with it. It to me, it seemed like the most poetic possible ending. I mean, how often does the universe actually work that way?
Yeah.
That the thing that you pour your heart and soul into to help grow, and then gets passed around between a lot of just weird executive decisions. How often does that actually come back? That you get to you get the return on all the investment you made. Usually you just, you pour your time and your efforts into something, you get a paycheck and you're done. So yeah, to have that opportunity again was astounding. There was no hesitation for me. Yeah, I was all on board with it.
Can you just, if possible, what your time in charge of managing Inside Gaming, take us through like an anatomy of a daily show, sort of like from deciding who's going to write the script, who's going to present. Can you just take us that process, your process when putting together an Inside Gaming daily show?
Sure. At the time, or throughout 2019, a lot of those decisions I was kind of handcuffed by logistics. So the way Inside Gaming came together was pretty scattershot. We got the brand back because Machinima was essentially dissolved, and since Warner ended up owning Rooster Teeth as well, it just kind of got handed over.
Yeah.
But we need a staff, right? So in tandem with that, we got the 3 people that were running Inside Gaming at its tail end at Machinima. Mm-hmm. There was a 4th who was on maternity leave at the time, and she ended up, I think, getting a different job. But that was Zach, Patrick, and Connor.
Yeah.
So on the day where they basically told everyone at Machinima that they were getting laid off, the company was shutting down. Everyone that was getting wrapped into Rooster Teeth, which is essentially the three gentlemen I just told you about, and then a whole like sales wing. We all met in this building in Warner in Burbank, and everyone was understandably shell shocked and had no idea what was going on. But that was the first time I met those guys, and those were going to be my LA-based crew. Mm-hmm. And then also, because Rooster Teeth had previously had a gaming editorial brand, like I had mentioned, the decision was made that would then also become Inside Gaming. So then I had 4 people in Austin that I had also never worked with before or met before.
Okay.
So essentially, a lot of the decisions that you're talking about who does what, a lot of that was decided for me because of different time zones and the fact that some people were remote and some people were not. Luckily, and again poetically, one of our main writers, our best writers, who still writes the show, Brian Garr, he was in Texas, which meant he was in Central Time, which meant he was 2 hours ahead. So luckily, I was able to reinstitute the exact same production flow that we had operated under when I was in Texas, which is namely that Brian would write the story, I would come in at 9, we'd have a call. And basically what that meant was I would set my alarm for like 7:38 in the morning, or no, early, it'd be like 7. It'd go off, I'd talk with him on Slack a little bit about the stories, pick the clickbaitiest one, give him some just nudges here and there, here's what to look into, maybe look into that. Here's the main question we need to answer. And then he'd get to writing. And, very, very lucky to work with him because amazing writer, super funny, very fast is kind of the intersection you need. So we would come in, we would talk about the story, essentially whoever was hosting that day, kind of like we always used to. We'd have just kind of a loose writer's room where we'd kind of talk about it. When Bruce was a part of that, he would suggest other angles on it and titling. That's also kind of, when it comes to YouTube, title and thumbnail is the most important, unfortunately, but also understandably. But that's also when we'd start to settle on, okay, this is what the title and thumbnail need to be. Therefore, this is what the first beginning of the story needs to be. Because it doesn't make sense to click on a title of something and then have the story not actually be about that or acknowledge that. Yeah. So we'd go over that. We'd have the writing reflect that. Sometimes I would jump into the script and write up sections if we had more stuff to add and there just wasn't enough time. Then we'd shoot around 9:30, 10 o'clock Pacific. And then it would go into edit. And, I can't believe I forgot. One of the most important things, and it continues to be one of the most important things, is that Autumn Farrell, who was Sugar Pine, she had previously worked with Sugar Pine 7 and done basically all the editing for them. Yeah. Fantastic editor, super hard worker, super fast. Again, that intersection of funny, fast, efficient, and gets everything right all the time. Had to talk with her when we were kind of putting together the team for Inside Gaming, and she agreed to come on as an editor, which was oh my God. If she hadn't decided to do that, I don't know what we would have done, because it was her editing talents that basically made the daily work every day. We would record, we'd get the footage to her, it would go into edit, and then she'd have an edit ready by 4:30, 5 o'clock, where I'd do a watch down, leave notes, try to catch any misspellings, of which there were basically none. And then we would upload to YouTube. In the meantime, I would usually do title and thumbnail. I'd write the copy for the description. I'd make sure I'd do any ad reads that we had to do, and let's see, a bunch of other stuff. There's also prepping weekend content. A lot of those production beats would happen in there, and then also it was a lot of phone calls to try and stay connected with the people working in Austin, to make sure that they were happy, and if they were hitting any problems that I could help out to work through those. So. Yeah, it was never a dull moment. It was 12 hours of working in a 10-hour day is usually how it went, which got pretty exhausting after a while.
Yeah. Was that the decision, the fact that it was so exhausting? Because looking just back at Inside Gaming generally, Bruce took a sabbatical, Adam just stopped appearing in front of camera, from what I can see through the videos, and you announced that you were taking a step back. Was it a case of you literally had nothing left to give? And to be, as you said, sort of towards the beginning of this interview, being in front of camera just generally is very exhausting. Did you just, at one stage, you just reached empty and go, no, I've got to get myself out of this for a bit because I've got nothing left here?
I don't know it's necessarily that. I still have plenty left. Endurance has never been something that I'm shy on for some reason. I guess I'm grateful genetically that I don't know how it happened, but I just somehow have a work ethic and an endurance for work that is shockingly well above most people, it seems. No, I think so. There are some factors there that I have to kind of be diplomatically silent on.
Okay.
But I think the biggest one of all, the thing that eventually really clicked into place with me is that in a company, once your value to the company is established and doesn't seem like it's going to change, you kind of cease to be top of mind. If that makes any sense.
I think so.
So yeah, and I'm again trying to choose my words carefully. Because I don't believe this is bad. This is just business. Once we had our content machine up and turning, it was pretty clear, like, we're just going to earn a certain amount of revenue, and that's pretty much going to be it. We'll do our ad reads, we'll sell shoes, we'll sell hair pills, whatever. And whatever revenue we get is just how that machine turns. And it's possible, and also the way YouTube works, it's unlikely that once your content has found its audience, that it'll just suddenly explode out and find even more people.
Yeah.
News is unique in that you get to kind of roll the dice on the clickbaitiness of your title every day. So if you have a news story that's exceptionally well produced, has a great title and a great thumbnail, it is possible that one of those will blow up and get 1.5 million views, net you a whole bunch of new subscribers, and give you a good bump in performance.
Yeah.
But that's really the game. And from a business perspective, especially once as a company, Rooster Teeth started dealing in TV shows and movies and things like that, our production was no longer, or it became obvious to me that our production was just, going to be another one. It was going to be a line item on a ledger for the rest of time.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. I want to be very clear about that because it's fun work. It's never a bad thing to just, geek out about games and read comments from people and just be a part of games media. That's been the grift my whole life, is to figure out how to get paid to do that. So I wasn't at all resentful of being in that position or doing that work. I really, really enjoyed it. It was more a question of sort of looking out at the years I have remaining in my career and kind of deciding what I want to do with those.
Yeah.
Because, I maybe 15 years, if I'm being extremely generous. I guess the internet allows people to have a voice and be relevant long after they're not very camera friendly anymore.
Yeah.
So there was always that. But I guess for me, it was more like, well, I'm doing this now, and I could do this for another 10 years, and then my legacy will be running this channel, I guess. And that's not bad. That's more than I ever thought I'd get in my career or in my life. But I could also just do that on my own and leave the door open for other possibilities in the process.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the decision that I came to, is that I can still do games media on my own because I've kind of done every step in the process throughout my entire career, kind of like what you were mentioning before.
Yeah.
I've done the writing, I've done the editing, I've done the on-camera, I've done the ad fulfillment, I've done the biz dev, I've done it all. And I'm continuing to do it all. But now I'm investing basically in myself as a person and I guess as a brand. And then I also completely own everything I make. And the only exchange is the risk of going independent. I've been an independent contractor before, so that risk doesn't really bother me. I'm used to it. So once I kind of jumbled those ideas around in my head, for me, the best decision seemed to be to go independent and to continue making the content that I was making in some form or fashion. Yeah. Because that way I get to own it all. It's all mine. And now my potential isn't gated in by, working 10-hour days and having everything that I do belong to a company.
Yeah. Were you mindful of the timing of that? Because as I mentioned, Bruce left, Adam didn't appear on camera anymore. And both of those events, coupled with your announcement that you were leaving, all seemed to happen in a very short space of time. Were you mindful of the core base that started this is gone, and we're handing it now to a completely, almost brand new group of people to take over and run it? Was that always in the back of your mind when you making your decision to leave?
Not really, no.
I didn't mean to stump you there.
No, it's fine.
It was just interesting when I was looking back. It's just, again, it's interesting you mentioned about people looking when you're inside, different views when you from the outside. Just me as a fan looking at the outside, the process of Bruce leaving, Adam leaving, and you leaving all seemed to happen within a month or two of each other.
Yeah, I guess you're... Well, it was more like 6 months, but...
Oh, okay.
You're correct, though. Now that I think about it, if on a long enough timescale, that is pretty close in proximity. I think the cleanest way I can explain it is that internally, Rooster Teeth has gone through a significant number of changes. I don't think that that's a shock to anybody. There are multiple discussions on the Rooster Teeth subreddit and stuff about what's going on. Unfortunately, I don't think Rooster Teeth is at the size of a company that can just be completely transparent about stuff of that nature anymore. That's just me talking. I'm not a spokesperson and certainly have no interest in getting involved in that conversation. It's one of the reasons I left.
Yeah.
All I can say is that I guess a consequence of a lot of those internal changes means that, some changes are visible externally that may have pretty complicated reasons internally for their happening at the time they did. But unfortunately, externally, I doubt that the full story will ever be known, if it even could be.
Yeah.
When you get hundreds of people working together, one person by themselves in a room is complicated enough. But you combine tens and hundreds of people all working on things they're extremely passionate about under stressful deadlines and stuff, and things get very complicated very quickly. It's a very cop-out kind of answer, to be frank. But that's the best I have, is that I have my perspective, and I can really only speak for myself. I think that Bruce has been pretty open about his reasons for leaving. I mirror a lot of those. And I think Adam's kind of taking a step back from Inside Gaming. It's just really a question of what you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to try and curtail your work hours to 8 a day, you really have to start to pick and choose what you want to spend time on. And some things just have to fall off, even if you want to keep doing them.
Yeah. So you are now an independent contractor. When you look back, what's your overriding feeling if you were to sum up your career so far?
I mean, it's surreal. There's no reason I should be where I am doing what I'm doing that I can make to myself, aside from just like I said before, a dogged work ethic. That's really all I can figure. I don't know, gratitude to whatever invisible forces conspired to make this happen. I'm told often that I don't own my successes enough because I guess it's invisible to me why they happen the way they do. So I don't. Yeah, it's a mixture of just raw confusion and gratitude and just sometimes being unable to process it really. But it's also just mixed with the sensation of, well, I'm not done yet. There's so many other things that I want to do. Some of which are realistic and some of which are not. And that's always kind of been the thing. But so it's intense gratitude that I've gotten to do everything I've gotten to do, and that I've gotten to dive in and learn and express all the skills that I've been able to. Yeah. And just then genuine excitement at the possibility of the future. And I think it's really that excitement that I enjoy most. When my alarm used to go off in the morning, I would grumble and I'd get out of bed and I'd get in the shower. I love my work, but waking up sucks. Now I get up before my alarm goes off, and I'm excited to start every day because every day has something new that I get to choose that I want to do. Yeah. And something new and exciting that I want to tackle. And it can be something mundane, like today I'm going to edit this stupid little transition clip for my stream or whatever. But it's a challenge that I get to set for myself, as opposed to, grinding through a stack of emails that I don't really care about just because I have to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess the biggest thing, I've always wanted to live my life in a way that I can look back without any serious regrets or without wondering what could have been. And I am so blessed to have that sensation now, mostly because I've so far been able to attain all the impossible dreams I sort of set for myself. So, and I think to some degree that's also what kind of motivated me to leave, is that I think that 20 years on, if I look back at a legacy of YouTube channels that I managed, I might wonder what else I could have done with my good working years.
Yeah.
And this way I can relieve myself of that future regret by pursuing them all as fully as I possibly can.
I can't think of a better way to end this interview except just one final question.
Sure.
Tea or coffee?
Oh, coffee.
Oh, good man.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes, good man.
That's more of a North American answer. I thought, well, you did mention finishing up your coffee before the interview, but
yes,
I figured for sure you would be on the tea train.
No, I've coffee all the way. The side effects of working in an office, which I'm fortunate not to do now. I'm fortunate that my employer lets me work from home. But when I was in an office, we had a coffee machine, but it wasn't an instant coffee. It was proper fresh ground beans.
Oh, wow.
And I'd get about 14 cups in a day.
Ooh.
Over an 8.5 hour working day. I was averaging about a coffee every 45 minutes.
That's an impressive amount of caffeine intake. I don't think I've ever hit that. I get to my third cup in a day and I start freaking out, and I'm like, I gotta.
It got to the stage where I tried to quit. I got to about 11 o'clock on the second day of quitting, and my manager come up to me and he went, "For the love of God and the safety of everyone in the office, please go and get a coffee."
It was that bad, huh?
Yeah.
It's bags under the eyes and.
It was. Now I'm down to 3. And that's over all day. And a decaf is normally in there as well.
It sounds like you've ratcheted it back to normal, non-medical, non-military grade dosage of caffeine.
How I did not vibrate into another plane of existence is one of those scientific mysteries.
I get it, though. It's I've long speculated that you could probably link a country's caffeine consumption with its GDP, because... Yeah, through 2019, I was at least 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day just to maintain the concentration and productivity that I needed to get through a day's work.
Yeah,
which was another factor that I was like, maybe this isn't sustainable.
Lawrence, this has been absolutely amazing. If anyone who's listening wants to check out your work, support your work, where would be the best place for them to go?
Oh gosh, I guess the main place right now is Twitch. So, apologies for a bit of a diversion here, but right now, this is what I consider my work vacation. So I'm streaming a lot to basically get through like my backlog of games. And I also just really like streaming. It's basically the core of what I love, which is playing games and sharing that with people. So you can find that at twitch.tv/SirLar. However, I will have other projects coming up pretty soon. I want to say, last I heard, end of April, early May should be when those start to pop up. And I will definitely be announcing where and what those are on Twitter and social media. So twitter.com/SirLar, Instagram.com/Lawrence.Sonntag. And then, there's all the other things. There's a merch store, Patreon, all that stuff. But if you like what you see, then you can figure that stuff out from there. But from now on, I guess, or from right now, best way is just on Twitch. Come and hang out. Say hi.
Lawrence, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Graham.